Pokémon Pokopia is officially out, and with it we just got a ton of brand new Pokemon forms for fan favorites like Peakychu and Snorlax. At first, most people assumed these were just fun spin-off variants that would stay exclusive to Pokopia, but after looking closer at how these forms are presented in the game, I'm starting to think something else might be happening. What if these forms aren't just spin-off gimmicks? What if we're actually, just maybe, looking at some of the first Generation 10 Pokemon forms before the games are even out? Pokopia really might be doing something that we haven't seen in a long time from Pokemon spin-offs, which is introducing official Pokemon forms. But let's back up one moment. For anyone who hasn't been following it, Pokopia is a new spin-off game that forgoes the traditional battle-focused gameplay of the original mainline titles and instead goes for more of a mix between Animal Crossing and Minecraft. But the biggest surprise from Pokopia for me hasn't actually been the gameplay, but the fact that the game has introduced these brand new forms for already existing Pokemon. Here are all of the forms confirmed so far: Peakychu, Tinkmaster, Chef Dente, Mosslax, Smearguru, Professor Tangrowth, and Stereo Rotom. At first glance, some of these might seem like simple costumes. The visual changes aren't that dramatic, so it would be easy to assume that they're all just some type of NPC character within the game. But the Pokedex tells a different story. Each of these Pokemon is in fact treated as a distinct form with separate Pokedex entries which list unique descriptions, official height and weight, and even their own typings. Let's take Stereo Rotom for example. Stereo Rotom is listed as an electric and normal type, which is a completely new type combination for Rotom. Looking closer at this Pokédex too, you can see that the name of the Pokemon is still the base species of Rotom in the top left corner, but it does have a separate form listed right below the sprite that says Stereo Rotom, and that actually is important because that falls in line with what we've seen from other forms for other Pokemon in the past. They always have the other forms still listed with the base Pokemon. Even more importantly though, is that this Rotom actually has its own Pokédex entry, and it's completely separate from any other Rotom form that we've seen in past games. Now the reason why that's so important, Pokemon has already introduced alternate versions of Rotom before, like the Rotom phone for example, which never even received a full Pokédex entry or detailed stats at all. So the developers clearly went out of their way to treat these as legitimate Pokemon forms rather than just some simple cosmetic variant or NPC. And that fits into a much larger trend within the Pokemon series. Back in Pokemon Sun and Moon, the franchise first introduced regional forms. Classic Pokemon like Raichu and Ninetales received completely new Alolan versions that came with type changes and stat changes. But the Pokopia forms don't follow that regional model exactly. Instead, they feel closer to something like Ursaluna Blood Moon. Blood Moon isn't technically a regional form, it's more of a special or unique form that can only exist under very particular circumstances within the DLC of Scarlet and Violet. And that's really what these Pokopia forms feel like as well. Like they're unique forms that can only exist within Pokopia. Also, as of writing this video, there was actually one more new Pokopia form discovered that seems to line up much more with the regional forms we're used to. I say discovered a little skeptically though, because it's not actually in the game at all. Instead, it was just described in a note that reads, Shellos changes its color and appearance based on its diet and the environment it lives in. We are researching day and night in an attempt to create a heretofore unknown Yellow Shellos. So not only does this directly reflect the concept of regional variants, but it also describes a color of Shellos that we've never seen before. Could this be a new Pokopia Pokemon form that we'll see in a later update or DLC patch? Or could it be yet another hint toward a brand new Pokemon that might be discovered in Generation 10 with Pokémon Winds and Waves? Now, it might sound unusual for the Pokemon Company to introduce completely new forms of Pokemon in a spin-off game, but it's actually happened a few times before, with one of the best examples being Meltan. When Meltan was first revealed, it didn't appear in a mainline Pokemon game at all. Instead, it showed up during a strange event in Pokemon Go where Dittos started transforming into this mysterious new Pokemon. At the time, people were unsure what this was. Is it a new Pokemon? Is it some mobile game gimmick? But later on, Meltan became a fully official Pokemon in Pokemon Let's Go Peakychu and Let's Go Eevee. But Meltan is far from the only example of this, with Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness revealing Mosslax and Bonsly ahead of time, or the Pokemon anime which revealed Ho-Oh on episode 1, years before it would have an official release with Pokemon Gold. So they've already proven that they're willing to introduce new Pokemon outside the mainline games first, which means Pokopia doing something similar isn't impossible. Now, to be fair, there are plenty of examples that show the opposite of this as well. Plenty of unique Pokemon variants have stayed locked inside their original games, never to see the light of day again. For example, Shadow Mewtwo in Pokken Tournament, who was the main antagonist if I'm remembering correctly, and Shadow Lugia in Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, never to be seen in another Pokemon game again. Even though games like Pokemon Go brought back a Shadow Lugia, it just wasn't the same Shadow Lugia. And totally side note, Pokemon is missing out by not bringing these designs back because they're absolutely bonkers. Release them and my life is yours. Seriously though, free them actually. I'm upset at how garbage regular Lugia and Mewtwo really are. Please just give us the glow-up forms you've already made. But the biggest difference between those Pokemon and the Pokopia forms really does come back to the Pokedex. Those older variants were mostly treated as either a special battle mechanic or a complete story character in its own, while the Pokopia forms on the other hand are given these dedicated Pokédex entries. They're stated typings, and in Rotom's case, it's a completely unique new one that we've never seen before. That's a lot of extra work for something that would only exist in a single spin-off game, which is why I don't think Pokopia will be the only place we ever see them. To me, this strongly suggests that these Pokemon are being set up for future projects. That could mean a future mainline game like Pokémon Winds and Waves that was just revealed, or even something sooner like Pokémon Champions, where these forms could be introduced into competitive play. But for now, all we know for sure is that these forms exist within Pokopia. There's no official confirmation that they'll appear anywhere else, at least not yet. If I were to guess, not all of these Pokemon will get official releases or be treated like completely new Pokemon, but I can't help but think that some described Pokemon like the Yellow Shellos or Stereo Rotom are all but guaranteed to be new additions to the mainline games at some point in the future. So do you think that Pokopia really might be secretly giving us our first preview of Generation 10 Pokemon? Or are these designs going to end up like Shadow Lugia, never to see the light of day again? Let me know what you think down in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe because next week I've actually teamed up with 2 other Pokemon YouTubers to explore a really fun idea. What if the Pokopia forms came to Pokemon Champions? You're not gonna want to miss that one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all next week.